All I had were half a dozen lame pigs. Nothing really obvious. No blisters or anything like that. It could have been anything. I mean, who would have suspected foot and mouth disease?
Foot and mouth disease, the most contagious of all animal diseases. It affects all cloven hoofed animals, producing vesicles in the mouth, on the teats, and on the skin between and above the hooves. It rarely kills adults, but the young and weak may die. The production losses and cost of eradication are high, but these are dwarfed by the devastating impact on livestock trade. One outbreak anywhere in Australia would close our major export markets of livestock and livestock products overnight. That means most exports of meat, animals and maybe even wool would stop until the disease is completely eradicated. And that could take years.
I came out to treat a horse with colic. It ended up taking a couple of hours, but it came good in the end. Then Nick, the owner, mentioned that he had a few lame porkers. He asked, as I was there, if I'd take a quick look at them. We went over to the sheds.
Look, this morning I wake up, I notice a couple a bit lame, and they don't seem to be, they seem to be off the foot, you know?
There were maybe 5 or 6 lame pigs all up. They appeared a bit listless, but nothing dramatic. The sows all looked fine. None of them seemed to be lame. Nick said he thought it could be trauma, as the mesh flooring's in pretty poor shape. It seemed a fair assessment to me. I was in a hurry. I was already late on my round, so I didn't have time for a full examination. Okay, I was in a hurry, so maybe I wasn't as careful as I'd usually be, but I didn't suspect anything abnormal. I mean, foot and mouth's an exotic disease. It's supposed to be overseas, not here, so it wasn't exactly high on my list of diagnostic possibilities, was it? I mean, who would have suspected it here? And anyway, how the hell did it get in?
Foot and mouth disease is present in Asia, the Middle East, parts of Europe, Africa, and South America. Imports from infected regions pose a distinct risk, as the virus can survive for several weeks in many animal products. That's why our quarantine regulations are so strict. But there's always the possibility that someone will bring in the virus on dirty boots or clothing, or via illegally imported infected material, meats, germplasm, or live animals. The most likely scenario is that the virus will enter in illegally imported meat and dairy products. The virus survives in chilled, frozen, salted, cured, and partially cooked meats. The pasteurisation process doesn't completely kill off the virus, and products such as cheeses can also be infected. There's no doubt that large quantities of these types of foodstuffs are smuggled into Australia every year. The entry of contaminated products does not in itself cause an outbreak of foot and mouth disease. The risk is only realised if a transmission cycle back into animals is completed. The most likely way this would happen is if these infected foodstuffs are fed to pigs.
Sure, I've suspected some of the producers of feeding swill to their pigs, especially the small backyard piggeries. And I've heard stories about local restaurants providing scraps. I mean, I've warned the farmers often enough. I've told them it's illegal to feed swill and they can expect fines. But what can you do?
The first case of FMD in Australia is likely to be in pigs. They eat meat, and pigs are the most efficient amplifying host for the disease. Pigs are mainly infected by ingestion, and they're the most efficient producers of virus in respiratory aerosols. Individual pigs can excrete 3,000 times more virus into the air than cattle. Cattle are highly susceptible to aerosol infection, and they produce good clinical signs. Because of this, cattle are usually the first species in which the disease is detected. Sheep and goats may be important maintenance hosts because they're usually only mildly affected clinically and the disease may not be noticed. Foot and mouth disease virus may be shed several days before the appearance of clinical signs. This means that the disease could be widespread before the signs are detected.
Something's really wrong, I know. It's more line, they're all off their food, and now they've got these sores around the nose and on the feet.
Nick called me 2 days later because the problem was much worse. He had a whole lot lame and off their feed. Well, when I saw them, I knew there was a real problem. Blisters on their feet and snouts. Well, all my alarm bells went off. I told Nick that all movement on and off his property had to cease until we worked out what the problem was. Then I called the district vet. I guess, in retrospect, I could have considered the possibility of foot and mouth disease and done a thorough examination when I first came out. But how was I to know it could start like this? Just a few lame pigs, for God's sake.
Here, under laboratory conditions, groups of animals are exposed to the foot and mouth disease virus in order to demonstrate the progression of the disease. The first group are a mixed bunch: 4 cattle, 3 pigs, 3 sheep and 4 goats. To show the highly contagious nature of the disease, only 1 pig is inoculated with the virus. The rest are exposed through contact. The incubation period is generally between 2 and 8 days. Here, 2 days after inoculation, the inoculated pig is reluctant to move and has developed a fever. On examination of the feet, early lesions are found. This blanching of the skin around the coronary band could easily be missed. By day 4 after inoculation, all 3 pigs are lethargic, feverish and lame. They prefer to lie down, and when made to move, hobble painfully and squeal loudly. The discomfort and increasing pain in the feet is obvious. If they were housed on soft bedding, the disease would be harder to detect. Vesicles have formed around the top of the hoof, on the heels, and between the claws. Vesicles have also appeared on the snout. They are fluid-filled and sometimes hemorrhagic. The cattle, sheep and goats appear normal at this stage. No fevers, no apparent illness. However, on close examination of one steer, there's mild blanching of the coronary band and separation of the epithelium in the interdigital cleft. The next day, the same steer has a temperature of 42 degrees and appears dull and listless. It has begun to salivate. The steer is sedated in order to examine the mouth. Unruptured vesicles are found on the tongue. They are also found around the mouth. The vesicles are filled with straw-coloured fluid. The other cattle have milder clinical signs. The pig's lesions have progressed. Some have ruptured, leaving eroded areas with tags of epithelium attached. Lesions are noticed around the mouth and on the tongue. Day 6, the steer's lesions have developed further. The tongue and mouth lesions have ruptured. There are now pronounced vesicles on all 4 feet. Lesions are also apparent on the teats. 7 days after the pig was inoculated, all 3 cattle are infected. They show typical 2 to 3 day old clinical signs: salivation, lameness and fever. Excessive salivation is the result of the painful stomatitis associated with the presence of vesicles. On examination, lesions are clearly seen on the tongue, the gums and dental pad, and on the lips. Lesions are also found in the nostril. The presence of vesicles on the feet is suggested by lameness and reluctance to move. Some foot lesions have ruptured, already beginning the healing process. The borders of the lesions are becoming less distinct. The pig's lesions have ruptured. The feet are extremely sensitive. They're eroded, with the claws becoming detached. The snout and mouth vesicles have also ruptured and are beginning to heal. The sheep and goats seem normal, if rather listless. Only one sheep seems slightly lame. On closer examination, very early blisters are apparent. In some cases, sheep can show lesions in the mouth. The disease is generally mild in sheep, with sudden lameness often the main sign. Healing lesions may resemble foot rot. It is 8 days after the pig was inoculated. All of the pigs and cattle are infected via contact. They have each developed foot and mouth lesions. Most lesions have ruptured within 24 hours and are now healing rapidly. Godzilla is another experimental case with spectacular clinical signs. As in most cases of FMD, these lesions have appeared rapidly, most within 2 days of infection. The appearance of lesions, particularly tongue lesions in cattle, can provide a guide to how long infection has been present in a herd. The final experimental group involves a sow inoculated with FMD virus and piglets exposed via contact. Within 2 days of the sow's inoculation, lesions develop. They progress rapidly. In some cases, pregnant sows may abort, and there may be high mortality in piglets due to myocarditis. Myocarditis also occurs in other young animals, particularly calves. Deaths in young may be the first indication of the presence of FMD. All of these cases demonstrate the high morbidity, low mortality common to foot and mouth disease. The key signs are excessive salivation, lameness, and the presence of vesicles in the mouth and feet. Foot and mouth disease is clinically indistinguishable from other vesicular diseases. These include vesicular stomatitis in cattle, sheep and pigs, vesicular exanthema and swine vesicular disease in pigs. There's also a resemblance to phototoxic dermatitis caused by contact with celery and parsnip tops.
What gets me is how fast it all happened. 1 day, virtually nothing. 2 days later, panic stations. 1 week later, and 8 properties in the area have FMD and it's still spreading. It's no exaggeration to say it spreads like wildfire.
Foot and mouth disease is highly contagious. It's readily spread by direct contact between animals. The movement of infected stock through livestock shows and markets is the major method of spreading the virus over a wide area. Indirect transmission also occurs. The virus can survive for several weeks in materials such as straw and manure. Wind-borne spread is also relevant. Under the right conditions, ideally low temperatures, high humidity and weak sunlight, the virus has been known to spread tens of kilometres on the wind. And people can transfer infection, on contaminated footwear or clothing, for instance. The spread of infection from farm to farm has been traced to the movement of veterinarians on their rounds. It should be remembered that the visible signs of foot and mouth disease may not be obvious. Infected animals may be eating normally, showing only mild external signs. In the field, the only indication may be signs of moisture on the tops of the hooves, or slight lameness, or mild salivation. An examination of the mouths and feet is crucial if there is any hint of FMD. The lesions may not always be nice, clean, clear-cut lesions. They are likely to be dirty, ruptured, and possibly indistinct. A careful examination of several animals may be required to find a classical lesion. For laboratory diagnosis, specimens will be collected from several afflicted animals. The best samples are from unruptured vesicles on the mouth, feet, or teats. Extract vesicular fluid. Collect the epithelial coverings of the lesions. From ruminants, use a probang to collect esophageal pharyngeal fluid. Blood should also be taken. A differential diagnosis in the field must not be attempted. Leave that up to the lab. Treat all suspicious signs as if they could be foot and mouth disease.
If only I hadn't been in such a hurry that day. If I just considered the possibility of foot and mouth disease. Maybe we could have contained it on the piggery. Kept it just in this area. But I didn't. Instead, I went on to another couple of properties. Then all hell broke loose.
A stamping out policy is the only way to rapidly eliminate FMD. This means slaughtering all infected and exposed animals. Vaccination may be considered, but the stamping out policy is the preferred option. The faster this disease is eradicated, the sooner we can reclaim our export markets and get back to business. If we fail to eradicate foot and mouth disease, we're stuck with serious production losses and international barriers to trade, permanently.
Okay, so it didn't happen. We're still in the clear. There's no FMD in Australia. So far, so good. But we can't just sit back and think it will never happen to us. Foot and mouth disease could get into Australia. It could be there on the next property you visit. There's a couple of things you need to remember. If you see any unusual signs of lameness or excess salivation, check the mouths and feet for vesicles. The signs may be subtle, the lesion's mild, but just consider the possibility of FMD. Don't try to distinguish between which vesicular disease it may be. Anything looking remotely vesicular should be reported immediately. Call your local government or district vet. They can take it from there, arrange samples and determine diagnosis. And don't worry about appearing foolish. Any number of false alarms are preferable to one missed case. Remember, you are the front line in Australia's defence strategy against foot and mouth disease. Keep an open mind if you come across suspicious signs. And don't be the one who missed it.